Okay, you're on.
Okay, I'm Mike Ridley, the editor of The Messenger, and we're here today with a Korean War vet from Baldwinsville, Bill Stanton, and thanks for being with us, Bill.
Oh, that's okay. Anything that'll lead some favorable publicity on the armed services. We've had enough bad. Let's get all the good we can.
We're trying to let people know kind of what happened. A lot of people don't realize that people that served in these, in World War II and Korea and other conflicts are walking around right amongst us, and we kind of don't understand, maybe don't get the stories from them that we should sometimes.
Well, sometimes we did and went through some things that we'd rather forget.
Yeah.
And they're hard to forget, but if you don't talk about them, you can put them out of your mind for a while. I'm not particularly bothered by bad dreams or anything, but I do have friends who don't like to talk about parts of their service.
Yeah. Now, how did it begin for you?
I was drafted 6th of February 1951 and went to Fort Dix, New Jersey for basic training.
How old were you at that time?
22. I went through basic training at Fort Dix. I went through the, well, they call it NCO school now. At that time they called it Leadership Academy at Fort Dix, and for a while was part of the training cadre there. Then in September of '51, I left, went to Fort Riley, Kansas to go to OCS, and I was commissioned as a second lieutenant, Corps of Engineers, on 22 March 1952. From that point, I come back home, got married, went down to Fort Belvoir, went through the company officer's course, and then I went to Korea as a second lieutenant. In Korea, I served for about 3 months in a rear area in an engineer construction battalion.
Now, what is that?
All right, an engineer construction battalion are battalions that tend to be attached to rear area high headquarters, corps. They are groups. The battalion I was in was part of a group. We were attached to, at that point, the 2nd Log Command, which was in Korea, and this was a command for a rear area in a combat zone. It had a bunch of hospitals in it, had engineers in it, had quartermaster, had ordnance, everything back there to expedite medical care, getting food and equipment up, getting stuff back, getting it repaired, getting it back up, and getting the GIs on their way home when they were done. The battalion I was in had a large area of road maintenance, and we also ran quarries to produce crushed rock for everything I wanted it for. After 3 months there, which was considered an extra training situation for young officers, I went to the front and joined the 45th Infantry Division as part of their combat battalion. And every division has an engineer combat battalion as part of its organic makeup. The job of that battalion is to do anything in the engineer nature that the division requires, and if necessary, to accept and execute infantry missions. Every engineer officer is also an infantry officer. He's trained as infantry. The engineer, by order, as part of their mission, provide engineer support to the armed forces of the United States, and when required, accept and execute infantry missions, both offensive and defensive. In fact, I did serve a 28-day period online as a platoon leader in an infantry position during one of the pushes. I tried to talk the general into leaving us 2 more days because that's the only way I could have earned the combat infantryman's badge. Every engineer likes to be able to wear that, especially as earned as an engineer. But he said, no way. I said, well, paper. No way. So I don't have a CIB, but they needed the engineer support, and we went back. Building roads, building bridges, building bunkers on line. This was a job in Korea. Doing demolition work of all types. Clearing minefields, laying minefields. All of this type of work is engineer work. Also, the engineers, I don't know if it's to this day, but at that time, the water The drinking water supply of the Army was an engineer mission. We located the site, set them up, purified the water, chlorinated it, and made it available for units to come with their water tank trailers to for everything that's used, cooking, drinking, and we did run 2 water points in the division area. I was not associated with them per se. I was doing my field of expertise in the military was explosives. When I went in the Army, I had a New York State explosives license. My father and I worked together doing small explosive jobs, you know, removing stumps and rocks for farmers. Now and then would spring a well. My dad had been a powder monkey in the slate quarries in Pennsylvania, as was his father before him. And with his expertise, he taught me. And I actually got my first blasting license in New York State when I was 12 years old. At that time, it cost 25 cents. And all you do is go down, give them a quarter, and sign the paper. And they give you a license. And the license, believe it or not, is to purchase and carry. You don't need a license to set it off. You just got to have a license to be able to get it and to move it. Today, the license, of course, is also required to set it off. Yeah. In fact, just a little sideline, the fireworks displays, most of those people have to have a blasting license because fireworks are explosives. They're being transported and they're also being used.
So you took that experience in the service with you. And
yes, and because of that experience, that's probably the reason I became an engineer.
Yeah.
I do not have a college degree. When I was first commissioned, with a couple of years of college behind me, I was one of the more educated officers. By the time I retired, I was one of the least educated officers. However, I had been able to get through, past the Command and General Staff College, the Armed Forces, and for a while taught in the Command and General Staff system. The Command and General Staff course, which is at Fort Leavenworth, Missouri, is a source of master's degree for a lot of officers. If you have a bachelor's degree in business administration, there's 3 or 4 fields in that area, and you take 3 hours extra at Lawrence University while you're going through, you get your master's degree in your field on the basis of Command and General Staff College. And by the time I'd gotten that far, I said, well, if I could pass that course and could teach in it, actually having my name on the degree wasn't a heck of a lot of an advantage to me, especially since in civilian life I owned the business. Who was going to fire me? Yeah. In civilian life, I'm a professional scientific glassblower. I design, manufacture, and repair research laboratory glassware.
So getting back to Korea, what area of Korea were you? Or areas were you?
All over it, pretty much.
Really?
Yes, the construction battalion was located in Busan. The division rear area was in a place called Yangdong-po, which is right outside of Seoul. The division itself, we were in the Punch Bowl area for a while. We had Sandbag Castle, which at one time was the northernmost area of the line, and just moved back and forth across the line. The 45th was used as a troubleshooting division. One of the ROC divisions would lose some ground, we'd go take it back. And part of my business, I wound up with a sergeant who was an expert on tramways, so we were the tramway crew. Tramways were a cable-operated car. We used to drive them with a 3/4 ton engine and transmission set down. String usually a 3/4 or 7/8 inch steel cable to bear the weight, and a 3/8 cable to run the car up and down the track. We were used to get water supplies, food, ammunition into forward areas and bring wounded out. In many areas, a 5-minute tramway ride saved them from a maybe 4 to 6 hour walk on a stretcher with people carrying them. Yeah. And that difference in time saved quite a few lives. And as it turned out, in our division area, I and the sergeant who was working with me were the only 2 people who were allowed to ride a tramway without being wounded. That's how we inspected the cable. It's the only way you could. You'd ride up the tramway looking for damage on the cable.
And that was because the terrain was so
Terrain was
rugged?
so rough. In places in Korea, you've been walking down a hillside so steep, you're hanging onto the small trees to keep falling. At the bottom, one step takes you across a creek a foot and a half wide, and now you're going up a hill that's just as steep as the one you just came down. It is that bad in areas. And when you got to carry people on a stretcher that way, you got to have 6 or 8 people, and it's slow going. And so the tramways definitely did save lives, not only in getting wounded out in a hurry, but in getting supplies up there so that they had it if they needed it if anything happened. Most of the tramways were built on the line forward of what they call the MLR, which is the main line of resistance, to serve outposts. These outposts usually were company size, a whole company on an outpost in front of the line. And you know, behind the MLR, you could build a road right there, but you weren't going out and build a road in front of the MLR. You were out in no man's land to speak. But we could build the tramways. It was all hand work, and that's what we did. Another job that we did quite a lot, the North Koreans and the Chinese had a lot of captured German 88mm howitzers. Probably the most accurate field piece of its size even yet today. And they'd bring them up, dig them in to what they called hold defilade, which is below the ground except for the barrel, sticking out over, and build a bunker over the top of it that could withstand a direct hit from an 8-inch gun, which is a 200-pound projectile full of high explosives. And then they'd direct fire on our area. The only way we could get rid of them was to sneak out at night, cross enemy lines, put 50 pounds of TNT inside and set it off. That took care of the bunker, took care of the gun, and took care of anybody snoozing in there. And that's another one of the jobs that I and another officer in my battalion did because of our work with explosives. Believe it or not, I never considered myself in danger really, very much. It tended to be fun. See how high we can blow that gun, you know.
Yeah.
See if we could get the explosive set under the gun. And of course the problem was sometimes there'd be nobody in the bunker, but sometimes there'd be people sleeping in there, and we didn't really figure we ought to tap them on the shoulder and wake them up and ask them to leave. It isn't, when you're behind their lines, you be as quiet as you can.
Yeah. Your heart was probably pumping pretty good though.
Probably on the first one or two. After a while, you're thinking of 100 other things.
Yeah.
I can remember every time I was actually scared, it was after whatever was over, I was back in the area, sit down on my bunk, and I think, oh my God, I could have been killed.
Yeah.
You don't think about it while you're out there. If you've got something to do. I'm sure if you're out there just waiting and watching, you'll start thinking about it. But when you're doing something that you've been trained to do and you've already been doing for a while, your thoughts are on doing what you're doing properly, especially working with explosives.
Yeah.
You only make one mistake with explosives. And with those things on your mind, you aren't thinking about other things till you get back, and all of a sudden you think of the things that could have gone wrong that didn't. Most of the fellows that I can remember who were working in these areas with me in Korea pretty much had the same idea.
Yeah.
While it's going on, you're thinking of doing what you got to do.
Yeah.
After it's all over, you sit down and you think, oh my God, I could have been killed or hurt.
Yeah.
But that's, by then, well, I could have been. And then you grab a cup of coffee or a bottle of beer or whatever, and you relax, you're going to go to bed in a few minutes, you think, well, but it didn't happen.
Yeah.
And let's face it, we all get the feeling as we go along through life that we're kind of invincible. We're not, but we think we are.
Yeah.
And so it keeps us going that way.
Yeah. Now, how long did you serve altogether in Korea?
29 years, 2 months, 16 days. And actually, I am still serving. I retired from active service and through the reserve system also as a lieutenant colonel. However, every commissioned officer is on call as long as he lives. If they find a mission that the powers that be deem he's the best man for the job and he's healthy enough to do it, he's on call. I do not get a pension. I get retired pay for that reason. To turn that into, I would have to resign my commission. I would then get a pension. I would lose the rights for the medical care for the right to go to the PX, to go to the commissary, to go back on the military base and stay at the Officers Club guest house, a heck of a lot cheaper than most motels. And the other thing is, let's face it, every kind of an organization always has their good old boys or good old girls club. And in fact, when I leave here, I'm going to Maryland. My youngest daughter and her husband live there. He's in the Air Force, stationed at Andrews Air Force Base. But a buddy who was commissioned the same day I was lives in the area. He retired as a major, served in Germany, served in Nam. He never got to Korea. But he's ill. He's not in good shape, but it gives me a chance to go. We're going to spend at least one day with them while we're down there. He too is a retired engineering officer, and we will definitely swap some lines.
Yeah.
You know how that goes.
Yeah. Now in Korea, how long were you there?
I was there a little over 13 months. I have 2 overseas spars on my uniform, Israel, 6 months per, in a combat zone. And I have 2 battle stars on my Korean service record. They were for the, now I got to get the dates right, the fall and winter campaign of 52, 53, and the spring and summer campaign of 53 up until the truce was signed. I came home 3 months after the truce took effect.
And what do you think about the current things going on in Korea? Have you paid much attention to that?
My honest opinion probably shouldn't be officially made, but here it goes. If we would get the damn politicians the hell out of the thing and let the military settle it, you wouldn't have all this stuff. Politics has to get into it. I don't think they really want it settled because I think they're lining their pockets somehow. You don't see a politician who's been a long-time politician, doesn't retire to a real good life. Hell of a lot better than I've got, hell of a lot better than you've got. Yeah. My opinion of politicians is only slightly higher than what whale do at the bottom of the ocean. And it kind of gets to me a little bit. While they need us to fight, oh boy, nothing's too good for us. Later on we found out that's exactly what they meant. Nothing was too good for us. And if you look at the way veterans' benefits are being eroded day after day after day, it seems like the country seems to forget that without us, they wouldn't have anything they've got either. And I don't think everything should be handed to us. I still work, I still earn my own living, everything. But I do honestly think that when a veteran gets in trouble, he ought to get more than a kick in the butt. And in some cases, that's all he's getting is a kick in the butt. And as we go on and on, it seems to be getting worse and worse. Korea is a result of not finishing something. I'm going to go back to the Korean War for a little bit with President Truman and General MacArthur. They both were right. MacArthur was right in the fact that we should have gone across the Yalu, brought the Chinese into it if we had to. We could have whipped them then easily. We had it. We had everything we needed. Truman was only right in that he gave an order. He was commander-in-chief, and MacArthur should have obeyed it. So that once he'd issued the order and made everything official, to keep at least what discipline they've got left, he had to do what he did. But he should have shut up early in the process and listened to the expert in the field. MacArthur wasn't perfect, but MacArthur knew what was going on over there. He was there, he'd been there a long time, and history has proven that he really was right. They should have allowed him to do what had to be done. The same is true almost every war we've had before and after. Today, we're still going to have trouble in the Mideast because they didn't finish the job. They got it down to the point where the politicians could say, oh boy, we did it, and back off. And they didn't finish the job. And I would not be surprised to see more Americans have to go over there and die because we didn't finish the job. I don't know if the rest of the veterans around, I think they'll agree with me, whether they are willing to set up and say it wide open. That's it.
Now, getting back to the personal side of it, now you came back home. Where was home for you?
At that time, it was on a farm south of Corning, New York, in a little town called Cape. In fact, my baby brother still lives on the farm. I left that area. I was went back to work for Corning Glass Works, that's where I got my training as a glass blower, and started running a dairy farm. And I moved to a bigger location. I had gone to the Federal Land Bank, negotiated a little over $100,000 in loans, getting ready to buy a lot more land and quite a few more cows. Kennedy blockaded Cuba. I got alerted to go back on active duty. I hadn't gotten the money, and the Federal Land Bank canceled my loans. I couldn't convince them to let me have the money. I sold the farm, moved back into Elmira, New York, from where I was from the farm, and never got called active duty. But that ended my farming. And I worked, lived in Elmira, worked at the glassworks till I left there to come up to a small company here in Syracuse. It was founded by a buddy. And this buddy got squeezed out of the company by financial maneuverings. And the new ownership and management goofed around. They got a union voted in. I will not join a labor union ever again. And so they fired me because I refused to join the union. I started my own business in my garage, and 2 months later I took enough business away from that company. They went bankrupt. I'm still in business. I think I was right.
And you stayed in the reserves the whole...
Oh, I stayed, well, in the reserves. All during my career, my class at OCS in Fort Riley in 1952 was the first OCS class in that area, and at the time they had changed. Every commissioned officer would no longer have a confidential clearance, he would have a secret clearance. And they had us fill out our own requests for security clearance. I don't know whether I X'd a different box than they told me to or not, but when my clearance come back, it come back top secret. And while I was at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, going through the first engineer officer's course in the series, I got orders. I was appointed as a courier officer. And so I have quite a few periods of active duty for a day or 2 days or 3 days because I was carrying a message someplace or another and either waiting for the answer and bringing it back or didn't have to, coming back. I've been in 62 different countries in the world. A lot of them no longer exist. A lot of them exist under a present, under a different name today. Some of the missions I've been given clearance to talk about, they aren't too interesting. I still have quite a few that are still under classification. And I'm not even going to try to remember how many, because some of the missions, and maybe still classified, I've forgotten simply because nothing much happened. You know, you take a trip. How many times do you remember that you've gone from here to there for some reason and come back? And yes, so some of them are quite stay in my mind, but I don't really like to talk too damn much about them anyway, because maybe they've been cleared, but maybe there's still some sensitive area. And other than being just a personal experience, they don't have a heck of a lot of effect on my career as an officer. Other than maybe they helped me get some promotions because I was doing it. But beyond that, you know, some of the messages probably had nothing to do with the military. Who knows what they had to do with it? I wasn't required to read it. I was just required to deliver it and bring an answer back. It was interesting duty. However, not really one for a married man with family. The phone would ring, you'd be told to get, and sometimes you're not in uniform. Sometimes they want you dressed so that you won't stand out in the crowd at all. You're told where to go to pick up the message, and when you get back, you go back home. And your family doesn't, all they know is, well, most of the time they thought I had a weekend drill in the military somewhere. because most of my messages were carried over weekends.
Yeah.
I have no idea why. Don't really care. And perhaps simply because I was in the reserves, we were doing mostly weekend drills, and so that was an easy way to handle it. It did give me extra points. It does make my military pay a little bigger now, and so I don't. Well, like I say, I wouldn't give you a nickel to go through some of the things they went through again. However, I wouldn't take $1 billion for any of their numbers. And, I enjoyed the military. I have a son who has 1 year to go, and he'll have 20 good ones for retirement. I have 2 sons who are on disability. One of them in the smoke and fires too long in Saudi Arabia, and his lungs are torn up. He's on 100% disability. And one of them works for the local school district here, lives in Casual Estates in Liverpool, had a leg torn up, had his back broken at Beauvoir. And the back doesn't bother him, but the leg includes a lot of things. He draws his disability pay, but he works as a custodian for the school district. And both my daughters are married Air Force sergeants who are within 3 years of retirement. My youngest son has 13 good years toward his retirement. He's a drill instructor at present himself, one of the units in Syracuse. The other son served a tour, but he's in Oklahoma working, helping run a business that builds oil drilling equipment. The old guy that owns the business has a son who isn't interested, so he treats my boy like a son, and he helps him run the business. In fact, later this fall I'm going down to see him and attend my division reunion in Oklahoma.
Good. Well, thanks, Bill, for talking to us.
Okay, I hope it helps.
Yeah.
And as I say, if another time you're doing an article on reserves,